Hi, my name is Milorad Borota. I am a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. This is my website, immconsultant.com. In the next 5 to 10 minutes, I will go over all Canadian immigration categories. In other words, you will learn what are the ways, all legal ways of coming to live in Canada. Let's start with some numbers, with some statistics. So I'm going to the official Canadian immigration website, cic.gc.ca, and here you can see statistics for permanent and temporary residents for 2010 and 2011. I'm recording this at the beginning of November of 2011, so the most recent statistics are, I believe, until June of 2011. So you can see that there are three major classes of immigrants: family class, economic immigrants, and refugees. So there is also other immigrants and category not stated, but these numbers are not really significant. So we can take a look at the numbers for three major categories. 60,000 people came in the family class in 2010. 186,000 came to Canada as economic immigrants, and 24,000 came as refugees or protected persons. So altogether, Canada admitted 280,686 immigrants to Canada in 2010. So far, this number is 116,000, almost 117,000. Here we see the table for temporary residents, which are foreign workers, foreign students, and the category, humanitarian category. So these are people who are admitted to Canada for humanitarian reasons. So we can see in 2010, 180,000 foreign workers came to Canada. 96,000 foreign students came to Canada to study, and also 24,000 other people came to Canada in different humanitarian programs as temporary residents. So these are not permanent residents, these are temporary residents. So we can see now, take a look at these three major categories: economic class, family class, and refugees. So what they are comprised of. So we can see that economic class, approximately 60 or 70% of all immigrants belong to this class, economic class. So it's safe to say that most of the immigrants that come to Canada are economic immigrants. The second category, family class, these are people that are sponsored mostly by individuals or immigrants who came to Canada in economic class. For example, if a person comes to Canada in federal skilled worker program, they become permanent resident. After that, they get married, and they want to bring their wife from their home country, for example. They would do that in the family class. They would sponsor their application of their spouse, and that's how their wife can come to Canada. So approximately 20% of all applications in 2010 fall into this category, family class. And the third category are refugees or persons in need of protection. So approximately 9% of all applications in 2010 belong to this category. So we can go a little bit more into detail. What are the sub-categories of this economic class category? Federal and Quebec selected skilled workers. So this is the most popular program, and most people know about it. Canadian government has selected certain occupations that are in demand in Canada, and individuals who have experience, work experience, or have a job offer can come to Canada in this category, skilled worker. Of course, this is a little bit more complicated than that, but this is in the nutshell what this program means. So these are people who have certain skills or a certain work experience. Quebec has a similar program, so federal and the Quebec skilled worker program are very similar, but not the same. Federal and Quebec selected business immigrants. For example, Quebec and the federal government have investor category, persons who have who can invest $800,000 in Canadian economy can come to live in Canada. So I will tell a little bit more about that later. Also, there is a entrepreneur class and self-employed persons class. They all belong to the business immigrants. Also, there is a provincial and territorial nominees. Each province in Canada and also territories can nominate foreign individuals, foreign citizens, to come to live to Canada, to their province, to their own province. So, for example, province of British Columbia can issue certificate of nomination and send it to the federal government, notifying the federal government that they want a certain person to come to live, to reside, to work in the province of British Columbia. The next one is Canadian Experience Class, for those individuals or those foreign nationals who have Canadian work experience or who have studied in Canada and worked in Canada. So if a person comes to Canada to work as a temporary foreign worker, after 2 years of working, they can apply in the Canadian Experience Class. Live-in caregivers are those foreign nationals who come to Canada on a valid work permit to provide live-in caregiver services to children, elderly or disabled people, and after 2 years they can also apply for permanent resident status. So this is the major category. Most of the immigrants fall into one of these categories. The family class is basically the Canadian citizens and the permanent residents can sponsor their family members, their spouses, dependent children, and other eligible relatives. But again, this is fairly limited. For example, a person cannot, in this program, cannot sponsor a niece or nephew in most cases. Approximately 20% of all new immigrants in 2010 came in this class, family class. The last class are refugees or persons in refugee-like situations. In order to apply for permanent resident status in this category, a person needs to meet the definition of a refugee according to 1951 United Nations Convention relating to the status of refugees. So basically they have to fear some sort of persecution based on race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. A person in need of protection is someone who is not able to go back to their own country because they face danger of torture or, for example, risk of cruel and unusual treatment or punishment. There are also another two types of applications for permanent resident status. One is application on humanitarian and compassionate grounds, which are approved in very rare instances, and it's very difficult to get permanent resident status in this category. And also temporary resident permit holders can apply for permanent resident status after 3 or 5 years, depending on their situation. So now that we see there are three different major classes of immigrants, and the major one, the biggest one, is the economic class. Let's take a look and see how one can come to Canada. What are the ways? What are the avenues of coming to live in Canada? So in this screen, I have provided that information in a way that is I hope interesting. So I put here that you can come to Canada through the front door or through the back door. So let's see what are the ways to come to Canada, to live in Canada, if you come through the front door. Of course, I'm speaking figuratively here. So if you are coming through the front door, you have to apply in your own country at the Canadian Visa Office. So sometimes it's not your own country, or maybe it's a neighboring country, but in any ways it's not in Canada. You have to apply at the Canadian Visa Office abroad. And you can apply in Federal and Quebec Skilled Worker class, Provincial Nominee class, Federal and Quebec Investor class, Entrepreneur class, Self-Employed Person class, Canadian Experience class, but only after 1 year. After you leave Canada for no more than 1 year, you can still apply in Canadian Experience class. If you stay at home more than 1 year, you can't apply. You can apply in other categories, but not in this particular one. You can be sponsored by your relative who lives in Canada. You can apply as a conventional refugee abroad, or somebody from Canada can sponsor you if you are a refugee living abroad. So the second way, a little bit more complicated, or I call it again, it's a figure of speech. You can come to Canada through the back door. Coming through the back door means you have to apply for permanent resident status from inside Canada, but only after you come to Canada to study. Then you find work, and after you work from 6 months to 2 years, it depends on the province, you can apply for permanent resident status in Provincial Nominee class or Canadian Experience class. So this is option available to students. The next one are workers. So if a worker comes to Canada to work, and they at the same time they have a valid work permit, this doesn't apply to illegal work of any kind, and after working for 6 months to 2 years, a temporary foreign worker has an option of applying for permanent resident status in Provincial Nominee class, Canadian Experience class, or if a person came to Canada as a live-in caregiver, they can apply for permanent resident status as caregivers, live-in caregivers. The third one is refugees. When somebody is granted a conventional refugee status or protected person status, they at that point they will have an option of applying for permanent resident status as well. And there are a few other categories which don't belong to those three major ones here listed. If a person comes to Canada with temporary resident permit and they reside in Canada 3 or 5 years, they can apply for permanent resident status. Or if a person comes to Canada and they marry Canadian citizen or permanent resident who is a Canadian, who lives in Canada, they can submit in Canada spousal sponsorship application, and that person, if it's you, for example, you came to Canada and then you got married, you can stay in Canada while your application is processed. And also it is possible to make permanent resident application on humanitarian and compassionate grounds. So so basically these are the two ways. One is if you apply while you are outside Canada or inside Canada. If you're inside Canada, you have to be a student, worker, or a refugee. If you're outside of Canada, you can apply in these categories depending on your situation. If you have skills, if your work experience is one of those 29 listed on the Canadian website, you can apply in this category or any other category. So right now we will go back to the statistics to see how many people actually apply for to come to Canada. So we can see in 2010 400,000 people applied in all different categories. 280,000 these applications are approved. So these Canadian immigration officials said yes, you can come in. Then they said no in 120,000 instances, and some applications are withdrawn for whatever reason. So in 2011, so far, 180,000 applications have been received altogether. So for temporary residents, application received. So for students, temporary foreign workers, and other categories, almost 2 million applications have been received. So now we come to a very interesting part, which is how many people are still waiting to come to Canada, or how many people are sent their applications, but they still haven't heard from Canadian immigration officials. That number at this point, which is again this is effective June 30th, but now this number is over 1 million people. So 1 million foreign nationals have applied for different type of immigration visa, permanent resident, temporary resident, or any other visa, and they still haven't heard from the immigration officials. So there is a huge backlog of applications, and the immigration minister announced recently that they will do something about it. So we will see what will happen. So to illustrate that, I will just, as the last thing here, I will show you an article from the newspaper. It's an article from Ottawa Sun newspaper. It says millionaires waiting to move to Canada. So it says here, more than 22,000 foreign millionaires are waiting abroad to resettle in Canada, bringing with them more than $9 billion to help cash-strapped Ottawa, immigration officials say. So a huge number of people who have huge amounts of money, they're still in the line. So if you are one of those who have submitted application, maybe this is some consolation to you, because you are not the only one who is waiting. So I think this will wrap up this video presentation. I hope you learned something about it. If you have any other questions that have to do with immigration to Canada, or with your particular application, please contact me. You can contact me at you can go to my website, immconsultant.com, or you can send me an email at contact@mbmigration.ca. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.